Wisconsin is going back to work.
I'm Steve Walders.
And I'm J.R. Ross.
This is Rewind, Wisconsin summary of this week in the Capitol. JR, the end of the session is always something to behold. I kind of liken it to, when you put your foot on an anthill and then lift up, especially in the Assembly, 15-hour marathon. But I want to ask you, I'm just amazed. A week ago we sat here and the oral chemotherapy bill was dead. Now it's one vote away, April 1 vote. I think the Senate's going to take the amendment from the Assembly, from Governor signing it into law. What happened?
It simply got too high of an issue for them. From talking to people, it sounds like Scott Fitzgerald, Senate Majority Leader, and Speaker Robin Vos miscalculated how they could bury this bill through procedural motions. And then when Fitz basically admitted to us on Tuesday that, yeah, when I did that, it got your attention, you guys wrote about it, and then the snowball began. And especially the Journal Sentinel kind of hopping on that story and really riding it hard.
They did. They wrote it hard.
The public attention kind of grew and grew and grew, and it just simply got too hot. And we talked a week ago about that old rule of you don't want to take a bill to the floor if you're Majority Leader unless you have enough votes from your own caucus to pass it.
Right.
But if you're too short of that and you've got vulnerable members like Mike Ellis who have to face re-election this fall, it's not worth them getting the snot beat out of them just to hold up that rule. So in the end, the public pressure overrode everything else.
Well, one question Speaker Vos was asked yesterday that I thought was a good question. I didn't ask it. They had this compromise, a $100 copay per month for oral chemotherapy. Why didn't that compromise emerge 2 months ago, 3 months ago? Because they thought the bill was dead? They
should have done it a year ago. If you talk to some of the people in the Senate, they're like, why didn't we take care of this a year ago before it became a last-minute issue? Got all this bad attention. But yeah, there's that question of why wasn't there an amendment like this hashed out before? And it looks like because they thought it was not going to go anywhere because of leadership, it just hadn't been hashed out, and then it became a last-minute thing.
Was the issue one more mandate on health insurance companies and whether they should be mandated to cover these, what admittedly are some very expensive oral treatment? Was the mandate really the issue?
That's what Vos talked about quite a bit, and what he said was, if you add that into the bigger scheme of the Affordable Care Act and everything new that's changing, this turbulent time in the market, that it's another cost to kind of deal with. So that was his justification, was they don't like having to dump this cost on insurance companies when they're dealing with everything else that's happening in the market right now.
Well, you and I agree the Senate's going to take it on April 1?
I haven't seen Fitz completely, 100% say, yes, we're taking it that day, but there's no way they don't do it.
I agree. And just a footnote on that bill, that mandate for coverage of oral chemotherapy would be effective January 1. School accountability, JR. The Assembly tried to cook a deal that would have included penalties for failing schools, but all they could do was take kind of a watered-down Senate bill that I think, let me look at the summary, and all it does is require charter and voucher schools to report test scores by the 2015-2016 school year. And then you had 4 leaders holding their hands saying, we're going to try to cut a deal this summer. They've been trying to cut a deal on school accountability for a year.
Yeah.
Do you look for any success this summer?
A couple of things. One, if you look at what happened with this bill, it seemed like the Assembly backers who wanted a stronger bill kept going forward, talking to themselves and not to the Senate, because without the Senate, there's nothing you can get done. And Governor Walker was out there saying, send me something. He wanted a strong bill, but he wanted something. And so in the end, it was like, okay. Then Steve Costello pops up this week telling his fellow Republican colleagues, look, if we do this, if we swap out this bill and let it fail, we'll get clobbered, and we deserve it.
Right.
And so if you look at that, then they did a little bit of a vote count and said, wait a second, we don't have the votes for our own bill.
Right.
They had no choice. And so that's what hurt them. Yeah, they've got 8 months now to work out something. The question is, well, what's it going to look like? Can they get all the constituencies on board? Because there's distrust between the private school folks and DPI and add in
charter
this and
schools and yada.
So, well, here's the thing. Do they do it in the budget? Now, if you put it in the budget, it could be a nightmare. But you could make a package of school choice, accountability, public school funding, and it becomes a trade-off then. I don't like this piece of your package, but I want this piece of my package. You give me this. Now, we all know that log rolling is not allowed, et cetera, but there's a way to work out a compromise in a bigger bill. Or maybe they can find an omnibus package and do it. It just depends on what the mood is like. Plus, what do the caucuses look like next January? Are they more
That's true.
conservative? Are they different than what they are now?
That's true.
Can you lose 2 votes in the Senate and still get a bill out? That's a big question.
Let's return to absentee voting. I know we talked about it last week, but it's now on the governor's desk. 45-hour limit on absentee voting per week. No absentee voting on the weekends. Representative Fred Kessler, former judge, stood up and said this is going to end up in court tied up just like photo ID. Do you agree?
I know they will definitely file a lawsuit. The question is, will they even get a chance to? Because Governor Walker has been oddly non-committal on this bill. And here's, if you look, he did an interview with a sort of talk show this week and talked about how if you look at other outstate, there are Republican areas that vote at higher percentages early voting than some urban areas. So I want to make it easy to vote but hard to cheat. And he wouldn't commit to vetoing the bill, which some people I talk to Capitol are kind of like, why? I mean, if you look at it, the base wants this bill for Republicans, right? They look at Milwaukee and Madison turning out these huge lines of people on the Saturday before election and go, that's not fair. But if you veto it, you make them angry and you don't get credit with like those people, the Democrats who hate the bill. They're not going to all of a sudden say Scott Walker's a great guy.
Right.
But at the same time, if he did veto it, or let it become law without a signature, he would, in theory, no longer have avoid upsetting the apple cart kind of thing. You know what I mean? Where it's one more thing on the pile, one more thing that's going to drive people crazy before the election.
No, that's true. That's true. That's interesting, but it's on his desk. 11 of the 99 members of the Assembly, 6 Republicans and 5 Democrats, waved bye-bye to the House last week because that 15-hour marathon was supposed to be the last day of the session. 5 of them are retiring, 4 are running for the Senate, and 2 plan to run for statewide office. Democrat John Richards of Milwaukee for Attorney General, Republican Gary Bias for Secretary of State, a 12th member, Dean Coffert. He may be gone too if he's elected mayor. And let me ask you this footnote. Any sign of Representative Kramer?
Not of this morning. Nothing yet.
No.
So, I mean, and there could be a couple more retirements. Chad Weiniger, for example, from Green Bay, he's up for a job with Brown County. Might he leave? So you're talking about a lot of folks leaving. And the impact is you, A, lose institutional knowledge, and B, you have a lot of really new people who all they know is the conflict of Act 10. Right. It's a much different bill than it was when I got here 14 years ago.
Yep.
Hugely different from when you got there X number of years ago. But
1988, for the record. Okay.
In the Senate, there are fewer moderates than there were, and all of the guys who are kind of in the moderate quote unquote group, they're all older members, so they'll be gone a couple, 3 election cycles.
Yeah.
So it's a much different looking Capitol than it was. And hey, some people like that. They think it should be more of a contact sport than it used to be, and they enjoy that kind of stuff.
That's true. And just a footnote, on April 1, 3 senators say goodbye. Democrats Tim Cullen, Bob Jauch, and Republican Dale Schultz.
Who happen to be the only 3 that work together, it seems like, across the aisle, right? I mean,
three amigos.
There are compromises at times that they reach, and that's not to say that every bill is partisan, but if you think of big ticket items, those 3 are the ones who work on stuff. Now, they don't go anywhere.
But they try.
But they try.
Okay, time for the WisPolitics stock report. Rising, mixed, falling?
Rising Susan Happ. So it's an interesting...
Jefferson County DA.
Yes.
Okay.
For Attorney General. What's interesting is this. She's endorsed by Emily's List this week.
Yes.
Not a surprise. They basically kind of recruited her to run. But we're hearing rumblings that other Democratic groups are starting to kind of get toward her campaign. And here's the interesting thing. John Richards is running the best primary campaign so far, or has been. That's the perception of my people I talk to. The Richards people and Happ people, they can't agree on anything in this race. The Richards people don't understand Happ's candidacy. Like, what's the foundation? She's from Jefferson County. She has no base. She has no name ID. How is she going to raise money? The Happ people go, John Richards has never been a prosecutor. You can't win AG without being a prosecutor. Oh, and by the way, he's got a 15-year record in the legislature, which is great for the Dem base, but we picked over to no end in a general election every anti-gun vote, every anti-whatever vote, and they will destroy him in a general election.
Wow.
The one thing they seem to agree on is Ishmael Lozan is kind of like still trying to get his stuff together after his top 2 people left.
Yep.
So put it all together, and there's a giant divide among Democrats about this primary, but Happ is getting some traction. Questions with Emily's List, they will help her with money. They'll make a PAC donation. But you have to prove your viability for them to really go all in for you.
Yeah.
And so what Happ needs is to build infrastructure in Wisconsin and to get more endorsements to help build out and raise your name ID.
That's a very intriguing pick for Rising. Mixed?
Scott Walker.
I've heard the name.
It's the silly season right now. We call it in the legislature, right? Last month always is. The governor seems to be like giving the Heisman, if you will, to the legislature. Like, you stay over here. I don't want the dirt on my shoes. You know, you guys do all this stuff. I just don't want to get involved right now. And there's a frustration when you talk to Republicans because I feel like if the governor had put down more markers on school accountability, for example, maybe they could have gotten something stronger. And they're saying, look, the last time we saw him really get involved was his tax package. He really wanted property tax cut and income tax cut. He was okay with redirecting money from the rainy day fund to the ending balance, whatever. My two goals are these two things.
Yes.
How many bills have you heard him say that about lately that are controversial? Even like the oral chemotherapy bill. It was at first.
He was all
not
over
on
the
my
place,
radar.
wasn't he?
It's not I'm not the one holding it up to like,
Right.
I'll take that bill. Okay, well, I'll take this bill too. So part of it is he just doesn't want to, you know, you don't want to get that dirt on you. It's a messy process. There's no upside for Scott Walker in some ways to be involved in that stuff. Flip side is he's not worried about Madison right now. He's in Green Bay. He's in Eau Claire. He's in Rhinelander. He is traveling all over, getting outside the Madison bubble.
28 different stops in 11 days.
Getting a much better reception from the Eau Claire, Rhinelander, lacrosse media than the Capital media. So, I mean, for him, these stories aren't really breaking through. It's better to have the optic of him in up north talking about new jobs.
Falling?
Asbestos victims. Now,
That's a complex tort reform bill. Go ahead.
AB 19, it is. And on the surface, you've got this, one hand you've got these veterans groups saying this is bad for us, right? And it's kind of like this whole convoluted thing about what it's going to do, who it's going to hurt.
When did that become a vets issue? Excuse me.
Good question. You know, they argue that they're disproportionately affected by these cases. A lot of their people are vets getting hurt, and that it hurts them. Now, the people who support this bill would say, hey, it's actually good for everybody.
Well, you've heard Grothman say it doesn't diminish anybody's legal rights. Excuse me. This is your segment. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a complex issue. Here's the thing, though. Will it be a campaign issue come November for Republicans? Because Democrats, will they go out and say, look, these guys hurt veterans. They hurt asbestos victims because they passed this bill to make it harder to get money. Now, Republicans have, you know, they can look at other veterans and say, look, these guys are saying it's not a bad thing. You know, this is a good thing.
All the bill says, well, correct me if I'm wrong, the bill says you must give notice before you file an asbestos suit, and then no trial for 6 months, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But lit pieces don't care about details.
I understand.
Lit pieces care about the optic of black and white. Representative Joe Schmo voted to hurt veterans.
Well, and so that leads to my final question. Election year charge of this bill hurts veterans. Walker veto it?
Good question. I think he's been okay with it. I got to go back and look, but I don't think he's raised a lot of issues with it so far. So we'll see.
Okay. So rising Susan Happ, mixed Governor Scott Walker, falling asbestos victims. Well, we're out of time. Next week on Rewind, JR, let's take a list of issues that didn't pass and go down them one by one. Sound good?
That's really.
I'm Steve Walders.
And I'm J.R. Ross.
Thank you.